You are listening to From Sobriety to Recovery with Jesse Mogul. Let's get to the show. Welcome back to From Sobriety to Recovery. I am your host, Jesse Mogul, and I am in addiction recovery. As you know, the month of September is National Recovery Month, and we have been celebrating it on this show by talking about ways that we can really harness the power of the present and start to see how we can change the way that we understand ourselves, that we look at ourselves, that we love ourselves, that we think about ourselves. And we do that all in the present moment by understanding what got us here, why we did what we did, understanding how we got to where we got, right? I'm starting to sound like a riddle, aren't I? And that's what you guys love about the show. And because I'm so amped up this month to bring in other people so that you can realize that the way I talk about addiction recovery is being mirrored throughout the land. And not everyone will utilize neuro-linguistic programming like we do on this show in order to bring the best out of people. There are a lot of different ways. There's NLP, and there's cognitive behavioral therapy, and there's tapping, and there's meditation, there's hypnosis, just like there's AA, and there's Refuge, and there's SMART, and there's young people in recovery. There's so many different resources out there for us to step into sobriety and journey through into addiction recovery. And today, I would like to introduce to you someone who works for Brightview Health. Now, this is an organization that contacted me after finding the podcast. They're located in Ohio, Kentucky, Delaware, Virginia, and today they sent to me one of their community outreach managers. She has been sober since May 13th of 2015. She has an amazing story. And not only is her story amazing, but what she does for our community on a daily basis is truly inspiring. Everybody, please give a warm welcome to Julie Clemons. Welcome to the show, Julie.
Hello, Jesse. Thanks for having me.
It is a joy to have you on the show. I know I've been working with Avante over there at Brightview for some time, and for us to be able to do this during National Recovery Month is really, really special to me. So I want the audience to understand a bit about where your background was, what got you to us today on the microphone. So if you would please share a little bit about how you ultimately found yourself in the throes of addiction, and then were able to journey into sobriety and ultimately into addiction recovery.
Hey, yeah. I had a very charmed childhood. I was the youngest of four with three big brothers that loved me fiercely and protected me. So through high school, I never really experimented with drugs and drinking and things like that because I was so protected. But out of high school, I got married and had two children. That relationship was extremely abusive. I got out of that relationship and into a second abusive relationship, had two more children. The relationship both of them were extremely abusive. I ended up with a broken back, a lot of other things, broken, sprained, torn, which eventually led me to pain management. Of course, the height of the opioid epidemic, and I'm sure everybody knows what's going on, with Pfizer and all of that things. I was one of the people that I don't know if you want to use the word targeted, or I just happened to be one of the people. Now, when I look back, I say one of the lucky ones because I wouldn't change my life. But I was overly prescribed a lot of prescriptions. A lot of pain pills, the amounts, the kinds, the milligrams, everything continuously grew for several years. I was also on a lot of other prescriptions along with, all of the pain medications. It was Xanax and Adderall. I don't know. I kind of felt like I might have been experimented on. I was, medicine to wake up and medicine to go to sleep and medicine to, be okay throughout the day. But it wasn't much of a life. It really wasn't. I wasn't the person that I know God destined me to be, or that my parents had hoped I would be. After, several years living like that, it was probably about 8 years like that. The amounts just continuously growing and me needing more and more and more. I eventually lost my doctor. And when I lost my doctor, um, I found a new doctor that would not prescribe the medications that I had been on. It did not go over well because at this point I was more than addicted to them. I was dependent. I was addicted. I needed them just to wake up in the mornings, just to live my life. So I ended up buying them, whatever I could find on the street, I was buying. That didn't last too long, being a uh, mom with 4 children and not working, I couldn't afford it. So someone actually introduced me to heroin, and that was something, we always say there's something that we wouldn't do. Oh, I would never do that. Or if I do this, as long as I'm not doing this, whatever this is, I'm okay. I haven't gotten that bad. I said I would never do heroin, and I did for close to a year. I also said I would never put a needle in my vein, and I did. Um, Luckily, I don't know why I was able to pull myself before I got too deep to using intravenously, but that was less than 6 months. And I always tell everyone I would be setting up in the middle of the night trying to figure out how do I find sobriety, because before you find it, it it almost seems like a faraway land. You know, you hear about it and you've heard terms NA and AA and smart recovery, but what are they? Where are they? What do they look like? What's a treatment center? What's, IOP? What's all these things just don't really make sense. So I would be setting and fumbling through, a phone book or talking to people that really I shouldn't have been asking because they didn't know, just like I didn't know, trying to find some place to help me get better. Um, a lot of fear in doing that because for a very long time, I placed a lot of blame on my doctors for getting where I was. Um, After a year of being on all my medications, I went to my doctor and told him that I thought I was addicted. And he told me that I wasn't addicted, I was just physically dependent. Um,
Well, that's not
I,
very helpful, is it?
right, it
You
wasn't.
know,
But you know what? I ran with it and was like, okay, well, if
well,
my
of
doctor
course,
says
sounded
it's
like
okay,
permission. And,
right, absolutely.
you know,
I am.
with Purdue Pharma and what's happened with I have is it the Strickler family? I don't know if I'm remembering the name correctly, but it seems like they're finally getting their comeuppance. And this story you're telling now is one that I've heard in varying forms, but it's like was fine, didn't have any addiction issues, handled my alcohol fine, never really got into drugs, major injury, painkillers, they cut you off the pills, you go to the street to find the pills, eventually the street pills dry up, and next thing you know you're doing heroin. And it seems like a story that's played itself out millions of times over the last 20 or so years. And it's certainly Instagram's got a ton of people willing to talk about this. As you go out there and you share your story, how many people do you hear that are still struggling with this? And especially in the area you're in, that whole West Virginia, Delaware, Ohio, Kentucky. I mean, a lot of the very rural areas are having a opioid epidemic that just seems to confound most of society, because we just didn't think that drugs could cripple that area of our civilization, yet it has. What are you noticing when you go out and share this story and you find people living basically your story through their own eyes?
Um, Unfortunately, I hear it a lot. There are a lot of people with, very, very similar stories that, they were on pain medications for, this injury or that injury or, a surgery, that got them on their medications and things like that. I think we grew up in a time where we trusted our doctors. We just like we trust law enforcement and we trust our teachers, we trusted our doctors to take care of us. And they listened to, Purdue. I think before I said Pfizer, I got COVID on the brain, I think. But it's everywhere. It really is. A couple of days ago I stood in line with a young lady that was crying in the Walmart checkout line. Um because she's in the throes of active addiction right now, and she's caught and she doesn't know how to get out. Unfortunately, no one is safe. It doesn't matter what state you're from. It doesn't matter what walk of life you're from. It doesn't matter how old you are. At 27 years old, being a mom with 4 kids, driving, a minivan, and I never thought that, I would end up in active addiction. I mean, at that point in my life, I didn't even know what it was. I was too busy watching Blue's Clues and giving my kids goldfish, and I had no clue that I was even in jeopardy of, being a person with a substance use disorder.
Yeah, that's a really good point to bring up, right? Like substance abuse seems like it can come out of anywhere. For the lack of a better reference point right now, I remember watching a TV show during the height. I mean, just some bad times in my life. And I didn't watch a lot of TV, but I watched a show called Desperate Housewives. And there was a character in there who just drank a bunch of wine and everyone called her an alcoholic and she had to go to rehab. And I thought, that's not addiction. Addiction is spending your last dollar on cocaine, knowing your car payment's not going to go through tomorrow. But I think it was in my blindness of, oh, my addiction's worse than other people's addiction, that I didn't realize that addiction shows itself in infinite ways. When people come to Brightview, when people step in through the doors, how is it that you are able to encourage them to realize that everyone's story, everyone's trauma, everyone's suffering, it's real. It means it's real and it's legitimate because it means something to them. And it's what led them to be standing in front of you. How do you get them to stop comparing themselves? Well, mine can't be, like you said, well, I'm not that bad because I'm not doing this yet. Well, you don't have to be doing that in order to decide to stop. That rock bottom isn't a place, it's a mindset.
Right. Absolutely. I think one of the things that I think we do beautifully at Brightview, is we individualize treatment. Because we're all different. We've all gone through different things. We all want different things in our lives. And we have an amazing team that makes sure that everyone that walks through our doors realizes that they have value, that they are worthy of being loved. And, let's take this one day at a time, 1 minute at a time, if we have to get you to where you need to be.
Before we turned on the microphones, we talked about a lot about learning to love yourself and being able to just look yourself in the mirror and not be disgusted by who looks back. And I get this with a lot of people who join the tribe, listen to the show, are clients of mine. I can't just, snap my fingers and have them go from hating themselves, loathing themselves, to loving themselves. That it's a process. It's a progression, just like sobriety into addiction recovery is a progression. What are your thoughts on how you can individualize that for the person? What is it that you start to show them, teach them, talk to them about, so that they can take that journey from self-loathing to self-love?
Oh gosh, that's a big ask, Jesse.
I like to ask impossible questions. It's my thing.
Right. I am one of, and I know there's a lot of people that agree with me, and there might be some that don't, but I believe when we are in the throes of active addiction, we do not love ourselves, because if we did, we wouldn't allow the things we allow, do the things we do, and therefore it diminishes our self-worth. We feel like it diminishes the value that we hold, which isn't true. Our judgment is just clouded and we're not seeing it. But everyone, it doesn't matter who you are, we all have value and we are all worthy of love. I think the biggest thing that was one of the hardest things for me, was to realize that I deserve it. I deserve to be loved. I deserve to love myself. It was a process, and it was a very, very long process. And I'd be lying if I didn't say I still struggle with it today. There are mornings where I look in the mirror and I find flaws and things I don't like about myself, and I get disgusted with myself and that negative self-talk. And I have to remind myself of who I am. You know, um, because today I'm important to me, and today I do love myself. And I can't allow that negative self-talk to come in and put me in a mindset or a place I don't want to be. And I struggle with seeing others that think they have no value and think they're not worthy, because that is one of the biggest things that I want everyone to know is you are loved. And even if I've never met you, I love you because you are my brother, you are my sister. You know, in recovery, we share a likeness in that we share this disease. And I will be there for you, you know, just like you were my own brother or sister.
That's something I talk about on the show quite frequently, is that when we're in these rooms, we all have one thing in common. We all have thousands of things in common, but the one thing that all brought us into this room today, who brought us to this show, is that we all had suffering, and we chose substances that ultimately we thought were medicine that became our poison. And so you look around a room, you think about who else listens to the show, you think about who Brightview goes out and helps. We all have suffering, and I think it's unfortunate that most people think that in order to learn to self-love yourself, to get into this kind of personal growth and development, you have to, and to be a part of this community, you have to be in active throes of addiction. We learn with National Recovery Month that the recovery is for everyone. And just because you're not on heroin or cocaine or drinking copious amounts of alcohol, if you still have self-loathing, if you can't look at yourself in the mirror and love yourself, then you're suffering, and you're suffering from something. And it's time that you seek some level of help. It may not be an addiction recovery center, but there is help out there for you that can get you to stop hating yourself. And I think it's important people realize that we're all recovering from something. The something may just be varied and infinite, but it doesn't mean that we're all still not suffering.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. That's, I think, human nature. And as part of our nature, we always categorize how bad something is, and we like to, you know, compartmentalize things. But yeah, like you said, we all are suffering, and we all, I think everyone needs a hand sometimes, everyone needs a hug sometimes. And I do believe that the people that have struggled with any type of substance use disorder, or, you know, a self-loathing, a codependency, and they've kind of, you know, turned their life and they're on the other side, I think that they can be some of the most loving, most caring, most generous, faithful, integrity filled people that you could ever want to know. And I know that because I see, you know, I like to say, you know, I feel like this is my tribe. You know, it doesn't matter if you're someone that's still struggling to pull 24 hours together, or you're someone that's got 24 years. You know, you have people that are your people, that belong to you and that love you.
I love that you use the word tribe, because I call my group my Wise Mind Empowerment and Leadership Tribe. And it's very much, you know, the tribe realizes that every person plays an integral role. Everybody has a responsibility. Everybody is here. They can help where they can help, and they can seek help from others who perhaps don't struggle with perhaps self-loathing, but might struggle with body issues. And it's a beautiful word, the tribe. And you talked about earlier, it's almost impossible to do it alone without a community. How is Brightview stepping into the forefront of the industry to really create the community that people can rely on out there in Ohio, Kentucky, Delaware, and Virginia?
Yeah, I think having the support that we need is an integral part of us, you know, stepping from sobriety to recovery and embracing recovery. And one of the things that Brightview is doing is they have someone like me at every location, someone that's going to be out in the community, someone that's going to be at all these events, um, someone that, if need be, they can meet you at a coffee shop to talk to you about what we do and the services that we provide. They can walk through our front doors with you. I think sometimes people don't understand, as a community outreach manager, yes, I do work with partnering agencies and businesses, but I've also been put in my role so that I can work with um, patients as well. And that's one of my favorite parts of the role that I'm in, is being able to be out there so that I can give people the shoulder they need, or, even if it's standing behind them to help them, get that courage to take that step through the door. That's one of the big things that we're doing. And then we also have a lot of other supports. We have a case manager at all of our locations, and different groups happen at each location. One of the groups that the location I work at is a skills group, teaching people how to, either relearn the skills that we forgot, or maybe learn skills that we never knew, parenting classes, budgeting classes, things like that. Because I think one of the things that we don't realize, because we're almost ashamed to admit it, is we don't know how to do something that we should know how to do, because, our peers that didn't struggle with a substance use disorder, they know, how to, manage their money, or, budget for something that they want, things of that nature. And it's not just, it doesn't just affect those of us that have a substance use disorder. This is something that affects, everyone, all walks of life. But it's so hush hush that we don't realize people are struggling. So it's trying to normalize it, I guess, and let everyone know that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say, I kind of struggle with this area, or, I didn't really learn these parenting skills, and I would really like to, because I want to be the best parent I can for my children. Um, just learning how to ask for what you want and say what you need.
I love that you mentioned about bringing this out into the light. There's a lot of people who talk about the stigma of addiction. And I think maybe because I've lived in Los Angeles, specifically Hollywood, for the last 10, 12 years, I feel like I live in a community where it's not a stigma at all. It's almost a badge of honor. I mean, you see celebrities come out, musicians come out and say it, and all of a sudden they get pedestaled. And certainly in the community, just as normies, we like to call ourselves. If you say you're in addiction recovery, I feel like everybody, pat you on the back and applauds. I mean, I'll go give speeches, and it won't even be an addiction recovery kind of speech. And I'll just it'll come out that I'm in addiction recovery, and like people applaud. And my favorite joke after that is, I think everyone should wake up to applause in the morning, especially for being sober. And I realize that I live in one version of a community that seems to embrace it, while many people live in another version of a community that might attach a stigma to it, want it to stay in the shadows. Then you see Simone Biles come out. She has her mental health issue there, and I don't even know how to reference it, but she has some mental health stuff go down over there in Tokyo. And now you see people wanting to talk more about mental health issues. And it's almost like, okay, perhaps this emotional corner so many of us have been put into, maybe now it's about time we all get invited out into the light, and we discuss our emotions, we discuss our mental health, we discuss how it's radically changing our entire civilization, drugs and alcohol abuse and all the other myriad of vices we can have. As you really hear me go on into all of that, how have you begun to see a shift just since, you've been sober now since 2015 in addiction recovery, a little bit after that, but looking back at this transition that civilization, our society seems to be going through, where mental health and bringing these addictions into the light and talking about them as if it's, don't be ashamed. We're not weak-minded. We're not weak-willed people. That this is something that millions and millions of people are going through. Why are we trying to do it alone or do it through whispers?
Sadly, in my corner of the world, I don't know that we've experienced how you've experienced, applause and it's a badge of honor. There's still a lot of shame here. When I very first got into recovery, I was embarrassed to tell people. I didn't want anyone to know, in my neighborhood, my neighbors, going to the store, wherever, um, because of that stigma, because people, I was judged. even recently, I've been judged. In the last 6 months, I had someone tell me that I was just an addict. Um, Unfortunately, but the thing is, I'm really proud of me. I couldn't be more proud of the things I've overcome. I used to be embarrassed of the things that I had done, in my active addiction, but now I realize every single step I took, everything single decision I made led me exactly where I am and exactly who I am. And I love me today. I'm not willing to change that. So, everything that I went through has put me right in this position to maybe, help the next person that needs, a push. Um, so anyone that's struggling, anyone that's, embarrassed of the things that they've done, or, struggles with facing the stigma, because it is very, very real in rural America, rural Ohio. Let your light shine, show who we are, what we do, um, and walk back with your head held high and your shoulders pulled back. If you need some help, let me know. I will lift your chin, because you have a lot to be proud of.
That is a beautiful message. It is a beautiful message. I think whether you said it before we got on the mic or whether it's happened during the show, but I want to circle back to it. You had said that, we all have this idea of the thing that we won't do. You would say, okay, yeah, I might be taking painkillers, but I'll never do heroin. I had promised myself no needle drugs, no needle drugs. A movie by the name of Basketball, I want to call it Basketball Diaries, with Leonardo DiCaprio back when he was like a super teenager. I was like, wow, this is a bad drug. Requiem for a Dream reminded me how bad needle drugs would be. And I think a lot of people, if they get this image in their head, they're like, well, that's what an addict looks like. So as long as I remember a video when I first got into sobriety at Kaiser, and the woman would talk about how there was like a crazy gym. There's this addict on the corner of a street by her dad's work. And she always thought, well, that's what an addict must look like. Just stands on the corner and mumbles to himself and always looks intoxicated. So when she got older and started to use, as long as she never resembled Crazy Jim, she didn't consider herself to be an addict. How much of what some people might have as their own picture in their head of what an addict looks like, if it's that crazy homeless person on the corner. So then you say, well, I'm an addict. Now all of a sudden they're like, well, in my head, I always thought it looked like Crazy Jim. So if you telling me you're an addict and that's what I think an addict looks like in my head, you must be like that person. So how much do you think that people's preconceived ideas of what an addict is versus what it actually is what is standing in between society really fully embracing those of us who've had the strength and are willing to push through addiction and come out the other side of it?
I think it has a lot to do with it, because I think that and the fear, the unknown, because, you know, sometimes we have these preconceived notions, and these preconceived notions about Crazy Jim. Crazy Jim was also dangerous. Crazy Jim also was a thief or whatever. Now, they don't know Crazy Jim may not have struggled with a substance use disorder, because, it's just what we see, not what we know. So I think, from talking to people and asking questions, because I want to know, if you have this preconceived notion that, someone like me, one of my brothers and sisters, they're not worthy, or whatever it is you're thinking, why? Why do you think this? And one of the biggest answers is fear. Fear, they don't know what to expect. They don't know who to trust. They don't know what's going on. They don't understand. And I think that's where it comes from, is we fear what we don't understand. And they don't understand substance use. They don't understand how we got to where we're at. They don't understand the strength and the courage it took, to take that step into sobriety and recovery. And so they don't understand how hard we're going to fight to keep it. Um, but yeah, that's that. Most of what I see, I would say that's where it comes from.
I love that. I just love how you were able to summarize that. And it really, it's a growth that our society is moving toward. I think it is a transition into understanding how mental health and physical health and all of these things are tied together. And we're going to close up on this. And one of the things I've been saying a lot on the show recently is that we often say that children are resilient, and that children can go through a myriad of things that happen in their lives, and they're resilient, they'll be fine. And then yet we see so many adults who have mental health issues, who have physical dependencies to alcohol, drugs, or sex, or gambling. And now we've got this new cell phone that most people don't even realize is one of the most addictive devices ever invented. I don't think that children are resilient. I actually think that they're very sensitive to their environment, to the way people talk, the way people treat them. And I think they ultimately grow up and then they mirror those behaviors for the rest of their life. Emotional intelligence is something I think that we really need to be spending a lot of time on with children and with adults, and really moving into a direction where we pay attention to our EQ just as much as we seem to care about our IQ. If I were to flip the microphone right now, Julie, and every single person on this planet could hear you, addicts, people who don't think they're addicts, people who support addicts, people who decided to stop loving addicts, people in sobriety and recovery, the whole world could hear a message from you. What would that message be right now?
That message would be that, oh gosh, it's a lot. So
say it all.
All right, here we go. To those that are struggling, you are worthy, you have value, and you are loved. To those that don't quite understand, ask. Ask me, ask Jesse, ask the person. If you're afraid of offending us, say, I'm afraid to offend you, but I would really like to know, how did you get here? How can, I help my child? How can I help my niece? How can I, whatever it may be, and supports. We cannot do this alone. And I'm not just talking about those of us that struggle with a substance use disorder. I'm talking about our parents, our children, our friends, our coworkers. We all need support. Every single one of us. I did not realize the effect that my addiction had on my parents until I got out of it, until I got into recovery, and until my mom told me. I used to cry myself to sleep every night wondering if I was going to get a call that you were dead. I didn't realize, and that was a very profound moment for me, that I didn't just need support, so did my mom. So did my dad and my brothers. I talked about my 3 older brothers. They needed someone too. They needed someone to talk to vent, that where they could tell what their little sister was going through without judgment, without, because I'm still their sister and they still love me. I feel everyone does. We have to be held accountable for our actions. And I understand that. And I understand sometimes we have to take a step back. But just know that we really, really, really do need the support of those that we love. That was one of the most integral things of my recovery, and still is to this day. I talked about being in 2 relationships that were abusive. I got married in March of this year, believe it or not, in Hawaii, to an amazing man who is also in recovery. And our life kind of, whether I'm at work, whether I'm at home, whether we're with the kids, it's all about recovery, because we've built this beautiful life that we love. And you can't tell when I'm clocking out and when I'm doing something for fun, because it all looks very similar. And I think it's because when I go to these events and I go places, there's so much love and there's so much support that it leaves you with this just very surreal feeling of, nothing can go wrong, which, things can, but if you rely on your supports and you utilize them the way that you should, yeah, you know what? We're still going to have bad days. Yeah, we still might mess up, but that's okay, because we're human. We were made to make mistakes. You know, it's okay to say, you know what, I didn't mean to do it this way. I should have done it this way, or I really messed up. Or can you help me? I think that was one of the hardest things for me to learn was how am I going to ask for help? But when you find, like we talked about, when you find your tribe, when you find those people that genuinely care and love you, they're not going to judge you and they're not going to care. And they're going to say, okay, let's take a step back. Let's take a deep breath and let's, start from scratch or whatever we need to do. Just know that if you don't feel like you have support, it's out there. Reach out. You can find me, on the Brightview Facebook page. You can, there's just so many people that would love to support you and be there for you. If you're in one of the states we're in, walk into a Brightview Center. I guarantee you will be enveloped with a lot of people that, love you and want to help you in whatever it is that you need.
Just a beautiful message. And earlier when you had mentioned going through the phone book, and that was just in 2015. I think before we turned on the mic, I asked you when that was because I thought phone book. I was like, was this in 1987? We are really in a beautiful, beautiful place in the world where we have this internet where anyone struggling can immediately Google and 50,000 places will show up. It can also be an inundation of information, y'all. So if you are in Ohio, Kentucky, Delaware, Virginia, you go to the Brightview website. I'll include the website in the show notes. It's not too difficult to get on the internet and find support, whether it be Brightview, whether it be someone else. And just a beautiful message that you shared, that it's all about the tribe. I talk a lot about how there aren't problems and there aren't bad days as much as there are solution opportunities and opportunities for us to take something that we perceive as bad and flip it into good. I'll never forget that on August 13th of 2016, I landed incorrectly doing a solo skydive and I exploded my left knee, microfractures, tore the MCL, LCL, meniscus, everything. And that's what led me to be laid up in bed for 4 months, which took what was already a difficult enough to deal with addiction and just sent me down into a spiral, an abyss. That 6 months later, the only option was either to die or to get sober. And I remember thinking, this is the worst day of my life in that hospital, having them tell me that your knee is ruined and you're going to be laid up for 4 months. I thought this is literally the worst. And I put cars into trees drunk and still thought that was the worst day of my life. And the day I walked into Kaiser Permanente, I've looked back at that day as the best day of my life, because had it not sent me down that spiral, I may have been trying to manage the monster that was within and never having even attempted sobriety. So I think for all of you out there who are listening, just realize that what you can perceive today as bad could have just been the best thing that ever happened to you when you take the power from that day and you let it lead you to sobriety and to recovery. Julie Clemons, having you on the show has been truly awesome and inspirational. I love it when I meet other people out there doing the things that I do. And it just means so much that Avante over at Brightview reached out and that we had you on the show. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here and for all that you do in the community and for being a part of my National Recovery Month story arc.
Thank you for having me, Jesse. It has been a pleasure. And I agree. It is wonderful to see across the nation. There are a lot of us that are like-minded and just want to be there to support each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Go out, everybody. Find your tribe. Find the support that you need. It is there for you. And as always, inclusivity over exclusivity, the power of positive energy, release, and flow. Every single day is the best day of our lives when we wake up sober. Shout out to Sunshine. Glow on. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.